contact, final maintain.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Galactic Terrors broadcast for December 2023. I am Jim Chambers, here with co-host Carol Gyzander.
Hello, everybody. Our last show of the year. It's very exciting.
Yes, so thank you for another year of your support for this online reading series that scours the known universe for scary stories, strange tales, weird horror, and all sorts of literary oddities from the most imaginative authors writing in a variety of fascinating genres. Tonight we have three terrific authors. Well, actually, two terrific authors and one terrific editor joining us in a little bit of a change to the Galactic Terrors format. Carol, who do we have with us tonight?
Oh, it's very exciting. We have JOANNE MCLAUGHLIN. We have Dr. Charles E. Gannon. We call him Chuck. And ELLEN DATLOW is in tonight. And it's kind of fun because not only do we have a different mix of authors and editor, but we're sort of expanding the way we look at speculative fiction this month, aren't we? So.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit outside our sort of horror comfort zone with some different genres and some overlapping genres. And we're making a little bit more of an effort to live up to our Galactic Terrors name.
And everybody has a bit of a connection back to creepy dark stuff, which is wonderful, and that's why we like them. Yeah,
exactly. And for those of you joining us for the first time, just again, welcome to Galactic Terrors. And make a note, we are broadcasting the second Thursday of the month every month. You can also click subscribe on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to like and subscribe just to help us out a little bit. And apparently the more likes, what is it? What was that from It's a Wonderful Life? Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. I think every time we get a like on a YouTube video, I don't know, Elon Musk gets more gigabytes or something. I don't know.
Or we raise another mentor from hell. You know, what? Yeah.
It's unpredictable. But you can also join our newsletter, the Galactic Terrors newsletter that goes out just about twice a month. We're not spamming. We're not swamping you with news. This is really just to announce the upcoming broadcast and then a follow-up to remind you that we're going to be going live on the date.
And to give the links to make it easy to find us, because that's good. Yeah, very cool.
Right.
So it's there's been a lot of stuff going on in horror, but one of the things that I like to talk about is what comes up on the horror.org website. Not everybody may look at that. That's the site that Horror Writers Association runs every month. And I thought it'd be fun to sort of point out the monthly feature called The Seer's Table that Linda Addison and her team put together every month. And they spotlight different horror writers that they think you should know about. And there's a bunch of fun folks in there. There's New Yorker Lisa Springer in this month's post, Vaughn Jackson from Maryland, native New Yorker Linda Ann Oshiavo. And I apologize with a name like Gyzander. You'd think I'd be better at pronouncing other names, but hey. And Ezra Clayton Daniels from LA. So we've got sort of both coasts covered in this month, the Seer's Table. So I will put the link in the chat in a minute. And if you haven't seen it, go take a peek at that. You know, they do it every month, and it's fun to learn about some new folks and see what's going on.
Absolutely. I beat you to it. I got the link.
Oh, you beat me. Good. I'm glad you did that while I was talking. Yeah.
But it's a great feature. It's a long-running feature on the Horror Writers Association blog, looking at writers from a diverse range of backgrounds. So very interesting stuff. And I think since we are coming into the end of the year, it's the holiday season. We have a little bit of an update on a seasonally appropriate story, edited by our very own Ellen Datlow.
Yeah. This is one by Lindsay Manusos, and it's on the Tor.com site, so it's available for free, and it's wonderfully creepy. It's awesome. So I highly recommend you take a peek at that one.
No, I have not had a chance to read it yet, but I'm going to.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah.
And I'll put that in the chat too. And what is the title? It's The Sound of Reindeer.
Yeah, The Sound of Reindeer. And I hope I got that right. But also a shout out to our member, Nancy Lambert, who mentioned that one and said, be sure to tell everybody this is a really good, creepy story. So I said, yeah.
Awesome. Very good.
That was fun. Yeah. So I don't know. We're here at the end of the year, Jim. What we're coming up on 2024. Can that be right? I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to be, if we believe the calendar, and I have my doubts about that. But it's hard. What's hard to believe is we started this in September of 2020, the Galactic Terrors series, and have been doing this for about 3.5 years now, almost 3.5 years. We're going into our fourth year, or well into our fourth year. So, and I think over that time, we've had a tremendous number of awesome readers, authors, and others come on and spend some time with us and share their work and answer questions. And we're hoping to do it again tonight and kind of close out the year with an exciting broadcast and get everyone excited for next year.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. That's great. Well, our first author is very cool because she has some vampire novels and now a mystery out. Jim, you want to lead us into Joanne?
Absolutely, yeah. JOANNE MCLAUGHLIN writes sharp mysteries, sexy vampire tales, and sweeter short fiction. Her mystery novel, Chasing Ashes, is available now, published November 1st by Celestial Echo Press. JOANNE's vampire trilogy, Never Before Noon, published originally in 2016 and reissued in 2020. Never Until Now, 2018, and Never More Human, 2020, is available on Amazon, as are the short stories Peppina's Sweetheart and Grass and Granite. On her journalist side, JOANNE is a longtime editor of prize-winning news and features for newspapers and public media. She lives in Philadelphia, where she indulges her love for home design and her 2 little granddaughters, and walks through the local arboretum regularly. For more information or to purchase JOANNE's books, go to her website, JOANNEMcLaughlin.net. All right. Without further ado, welcome, JOANNE.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to read some excerpts from Chasing Ashes, my mystery. Lara, 2016. No one can see where the fire singed me. My scars are well hidden. I breathe with effort, but not from smoke that seared my lungs. I ache, but not because scorched beams crushed any part of me. My sleep-shattering post-traumatic stress is real and difficult to explain. I was not in the building that burned. Google me. You'll find 1 Pulitzer Prize for public service journalism and a dozen lesser-known awards. A publisher's weekly announcement that Saddington Nair Books had acquired Lara Cunningham's manuscript, Bloodstrains. Dig deeper and you'll find a divorce decree, a custody agreement, a property settlement. Though I have pretty solid stock in my professional world, my personal life needs some repair. What I want is to put the horrific event behind me, but I can't because they never found her. 12 bodies, but not Kate McDonald's. And so, 2 young women vanished that awful day 24 years ago when the challenge went up in flames. Ashes to ashes. My audience might stare, uncertain what to do once that oddly intimate little speech ended. Then finally someone might applaud, and the rest might imitate. Clap for the crazy writer. True crime's always a hit with readers, or so everyone assured me. True story, you're in this to right wrongs. Publisher, publicist, national bookstore chain, a relentless choir singing, do it now, do it here, today, tomorrow, every day, new readers await. I waited, paralyzed, for too long. When the calendar flipped to that ugly milestone, the 20th anniversary of Kate's disappearance, I knew I had to pull myself together. Pull together all the bits and pieces and interviews I'd been collecting and tell the challenge fire story no one else had told. It took 4 more years to get here. No more wasting time. Just do this, Laura, before it sucks the life out of you once and for all. Central Pennsylvania, October 2016. The familiar nausea swept over me and the dizziness. A cup clattered next to my cheek, splashing coffee. Get your head off my table, Cunningham. You're a health code violation waiting to happen. I dared to open an eye. I'm also your oldest friend, Baker. Tu casa es mi casa. My hair smells of French roast now. Crap. A plate crashed into my wrist, dusting my hand with cinnamon. Eat your damn free breakfast and get out and do what you came to do. Jane slid into the booth across from me and scowled. You're not being waterboarded. You're reading from your new book. It's my publisher's own version of torture. This is your turf, Laura. Ha! More like we have to sell the bugger. We'll market it to the captive audience, the poor students for whom Steve Brightman will make it required reading. Jane kicked me under the table. Buck up, girl. Get it together. Do it for Kate. Why the hell else? The publicist was expecting me at the university's main library in an hour. Demand for tickets for the reading far exceeded expectations, so the event had been moved there from the campus bookstore. I sat up and scraped damp hair away from my mouth, gulped some tepid coffee, and licked cinnamon powder from my thumb. Jane rattled the plate. I love you and hate you for dredging up those memories, even the good ones. But I understand why you thought it was necessary. Did writing the book help? Did not writing it help? Kate is still gone. Andrew Michaels might still be alive. It was my fault. Bullshit, Jane hissed. We all knew what Kate was up to, more or less. More or less the part where she ran into a hell where people got killed. I drained my cup, pushed the cinnamon bun away, unable to eat. How do I look? Jane polished a teaspoon with a paper napkin and held it up as a makeshift mirror. Not like you drove more than 100 miles from your house in Philly to get here. Not like a 46-year-old woman who doesn't sleep more than 3 hours a night, that's for sure. You always look great. It's why I despise you. She stood and kissed the top of my head. Go make them want to finally solve this thing so we'll all get some peace. If anyone can do it, you can. Stage fright, remember? I hate speaking in public. You'll hate yourself more if you don't. I set foot onto University Avenue for what seemed like the first time in forever, grateful for the flats I grabbed from my closet at the last minute. The downtown strip had transformed with new apartment towers and new boutiques flanking Trilby's, the dive bar turned coffee house Jane now owned. But on the other side of that asphalt divide, cold sweat dampened my underarms and my forehead. Taking baby steps, I made it to a bench off the campus mall, put my head between my legs and vomited, just missing my shoes. Jane liked to say it had been therapeutic for her to move back to this town, that she believed Kate would turn up one day and need to see a friendly face. I had avoided this place as much as possible. Why immerse myself in Kate's absence when I couldn't get past it wherever I lived? Jane couldn't either. Not really. Neither could Nick. Oh, dear God, Nick. I prayed he would stay the hell away. The bell tower's clock told 9:30. I dragged myself from the bench, hoping the publicist would have gum or mints, something to take away the taste of my fear. The dean of the College of Communications stepped up to a podium in the university library's packed lobby. If you're here today, you've heard of the fire at the Challenge. Last I looked, it was still ranking high in our search analytics, not too far below the football team, the Alumni Association, and a blog that reviews the local bars. So you know about the questions that surround the fire even now. Steve Brightman paused for dramatic effect. Quite the master of ceremonies, my brother-in-law. Bloodstains is a memoir as well as an expose of what the authorities missed in their investigation of the Challenge fire. I was Laura Cunningham's editor for years in Philadelphia, so I can tell you this. She is a brilliant, tireless journalist with a unique perspective on what happened here in March 1992, a tragedy she reported on for this school's newspaper, The Informed Student, and felt personally as well. Kate McDonald, Laura's childhood friend and college roommate, was never seen again after the fire. They were seniors when Kate died or simply vanished. Neither has ever been determined. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Laura Cunningham. I managed to walk over to Steve and let him hug me. "You got this, kiddo," he whispered. "This is your story to tell. Tell it again and again." I fixed my eyes on a girl wearing a blue hat with red woolen braids hanging down from the ear flaps. 10 students were found dead on March 19, 1992 at the Challenge out on Allegheny Highway on the grounds of this university. The Challenge was considered a haven for young people in pain because of addiction, abuse, family issues, you name it. A safe space where they could thrive and live. The internet was just becoming a part of our daily lives back then. Students enrolled here weren't required to have computers or email. Not everybody had cell phones. It was still possible to hide from the larger world or to get lost in someone else's. Not found in the ruins of the fire, or rather not definitively identified, were the remains of Andrew Michaels, the non-denominational preacher who founded the Challenge, or those of my friend Kate McDonald, one of the editors at the campus newspaper. Forensics teams were divided on whether remains discovered outside the building the day after the fire belonged to Michaels, though a formal inquest later concluded they did. For Kate, no remains were a match. The investigation that followed, and some evidence cited in the early lawsuits that resulted from the fire, showed the Challenge to be a sham, almost a cult, and Andrew Michaels to be a charismatic figure who bent vulnerable individuals to his will. Kate walked into that world trying to find the truth behind the brutal death of a friend she believed had died at the hands of Michaels, either directly or indirectly, and hoping to bring Michaels down for the charlatan she believed him to be. Bloodstains is Kate's story, drawn from her personal journals and articles she wrote for the Informed Student, as well as my own reporting. What my book reveals is how so many institutions failed Kate and those students, their families and friends, and all of us in the process. I paused for a few deep breaths to calm myself before reading from the opening chapter. Toward the back of the crowd, I spotted Steve and his brother, my husband, David Brightman, for whom fame had always been a turn-on. Depending on the success of this book, I could well be facing a second divorce, though to be honest, even the hot bestseller might not prove enough to save our marriage. In a corner behind them stood Nick Fabrizio, my ex-husband, whose police work I was about to dissect. Some might say discredit. Nick, March, 1992. The Firebird idled on the left shoulder, almost obscured by the gray haze swallowing the road. Headlights on, driver's light open, a Supergirl keychain that Nick recognized as Kate's hanging from the ignition. He scrambled back to his car and gunned it, taking the final quarter mile to the Challenge at a suspension-destroying clip. Cinders lit the night, thick like fireflies, swirling evidence of an inferno ahead. Nick's radio crackled with chatter. All units, all units! Then behind him, sirens blared. He had to get out of the way of the ladder trucks. The wail grew louder. He drove up an embankment, abandoned his car, and ran. Kate must have done the same thing. How far ahead of him could she be? A great wall of heat threw Nick down onto his hands and knees, dirt and rocks scraping his exposed skin. He struggled to his feet, saw the beams of the fire truck spotlights, heard the roar of angry orange flames licking at every inch of what was once a commercial dairy barn, now a residential counseling center. He picked his way through the hoses, deep in mud created by water cascading from the third story of the wooden stone structure. Too much wood, too little stone. The building was probably a goner. As for anyone inside the Challenge, back up, get out of here. Nick flashed his badge. I'm looking for someone, a young woman who was headed this way less than 30 minutes ago. A yellow helmet nodded toward the heart of the blaze. Everybody I have is up at that structure, detective. All men in full gear. Haven't seen anyone yet that didn't arrive on a fire truck, and we're still battling our way inside. Hope your girl wasn't anywhere around when that fire started. Nick planted his feet. A chemical swamp formed around them. A Pontiac parked on the side of the road back there is hers. The door is wide open and the engine is running. She has to be here somewhere. A sudden blare sent the firefighter running toward the building. A flash of light blinded Nick for a second. Then he thought he saw someone on the roof. A second explosion rocketed flames higher. No more than a heartbeat later, the roof collapsed. And if you want to know more, get a copy of Chasing Ashes.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Now we're all going to explode and go up in flames. Okay. That's a heck of a way to end the year, Joanne, I gotta say. So, well, that's very exciting. I'm intrigued by, it sounds like it's a true crime investigation kind of story. Is it, in a way, is this something that you follow in real life? Do you?
Not at all. Unless you allow for the fact that I was a journalist for many, many decades, and nonfiction has been my life, and a lot of true crime has been my life. In fact, when I started writing this book, I didn't really think of it as me writing a story about somebody writing a true crime book.
Yeah. It's very meta, I think. Yeah. So I do have to ask as well. I hope that it doesn't seem like we are waterboarding you tonight by having you come on and read like the author, because I think you're very friendly and relaxed. So yeah. But I know there are a lot of people who are nervous about that. So I think you probably focused on something that a lot of people can identify with. Isn't that one of the biggest fears? Is appearing in public?
No, not at all.
Not yours and mine, but other people's.
Not mine.
Yeah, cool. No, that's really neat. So I'm curious, one of the things I mentioned and in your bio as well, you have the 3 vampire novels, and that's what we talked about when I first met you, because this wasn't out yet when we first met,
right,
and such. So we talked about vampire novels, and now this has gone into mystery stuff. Do you see some similarities and some differences between these kind of genres? I mean,
I was recently on a panel at PhilCon, the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society convention, and we talked about the horror in other genres.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of seems to me, having now done this kind of transition, that, and certainly in a lot of classic horror, the monster is without.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in mystery, a lot of times the monster is within. And in this case, certainly a lot of these characters are driven, Laura, as I think is evident from what I just read, is driven by a real sense of guilt here. She feels responsible for the fact that her friend is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives a lot of it. I think it's something that you see in a lot of mysteries. Main characters are driven by some sense of responsibility, of some sense of guilt for what has happened, and so the horror is within them.
Yeah, and post-traumatic stress is a very intense thing that can cause all sorts of horrific reactions. I know. Yeah. Oh, that's a very interesting thing to explore in this case. Even 20 years later, she's still haunted, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that kind of motivated my vampire books was not so much a sense of the monster without, but also the sense of the monster within the family. This little kind of crazy band of vampire musicians.
Yes.
It's really a dysfunctional family in many, many ways.
Yeah. I'm going to show a picture of one of the covers real quick. Is that the first one, right?
That's the first one.
Never Before Noon. Yeah. So her parents are rock and roll superstars, right?
Right.
And they happen to be vampires. Okay. So for those of you who are wanting a little more horror than just the mystery, go look at that one. That's cool.
Absolutely.
We'll link it later. Yeah. No, but this is very cool. So I also have a theory myself that every story has at least a little bit of mystery in it, because otherwise, why would you read it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Didn't somebody say at one point that every real story is about a secret?
Ooh.
I
Okay.
can't remember who said that.
Oh, I like that. And it's a way to unravel it and all.
Yeah.
And I know the author J.D. Barker has written a bunch of thrillers, as well as some horror stuff, like Dracul, for example, is one of the novels. And he calls himself just a suspense writer, because, the suspense in a mystery, the suspense in a horror novel, that's what's the important part, is to keep us on the edge of our seat, I think.
Right.
What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And I think one of the really great things about horror and mystery is that there's so many variations of things that can just draw you in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that appealed to me about writing about vampires is the notion of seduction.
Yes.
So many mysteries are about some sort of manipulation, as are horror novels. And seduction is, it's a manipulation that you buy into willingly.
Yeah.
You may not want to stay in it permanently, but it is something that, is very alluring. And
Yeah.
I liked that, that sort of thread running through my stories.
Do you think that reading these books does something for us as a reader? Does it help us with anything, whether it's mystery or horror?
I think it can open our eyes to a lot of different perspectives, if that makes sense. I know that I don't read a lot of contemporary horror. I have to admit, not as probably as much as I should. I've been kind of immersed in mysteries for about the last 4 years, I confess.
Yeah.
But classic horror, it sort of exposes you to your own fears, and I hope helps to give you some courage in facing them. I think the same can be true of mysteries, because you, especially in certain thrillers and suspense novels, you're exposed to circumstances. You're like, oh my God, I never even thought that could possibly happen. And it's not an otherworldly thing. It's not a speculative thing, except in the sense of, oh my God, could this really happen to me? And I don't think a lot of us think that, the stalker, the guy next door is going to be a stalker or a serial killer, or the ex-husband is going to come back, or even the current husband is a serial killer. Obviously, if you read a lot of crime novels, true crime novels these days, true crime books, a lot of it is the serial killer is the guy next door these days, and things like that.
Sometimes the scariest thing is close to home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I did notice in this book, you have some interesting relationships that I'm sure are going to come into great conflict, with the ex-husband and the police detective, and, another husband. And yeah. So was that fun?
Yes. Because I tried to make her a real life woman, with a career and a crazy complicated life and a son from each marriage.
Yeah.
And, because people have real lives like that. Not everything is cut and dry. Not every, sleuth, even an amateur sleuth, is somebody, who's just free to go off into the next state to find the killer. I mean, she's kind of tied down.
A day job or a family or whatever. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So these things have to fit into a real frame in that case. Yeah,
exactly.
And I have one last question for you. How did you enjoy working with the two time periods? Was that interesting? Was it difficult? Did it work in your head easily, or did you have to spreadsheet it, or what did you do?
No, I'm not a spreadsheet person, I confess. Okay. I'm very much a pantser. The hardest part was deciding which year to have the fire take place in.
Oh.
Because I needed it to be in a period where college students were not hooked up. They were not in, they were not on cell phones. They were not having to have laptops in class. They were not on email constantly. And I fortunately, I was working with a lot of people who were, roughly the age Laura's supposed to be in the book. And they were like, oh yeah, I graduated in X year, and this was the year it had to be.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was the hardest thing to decide.
Oh, well, that's interesting. It's kind of fun to see behind the scenes a little bit about what's powering some things, so that's very cool. Well, thank you. You and I have overlapped at a number of conventions, and sometimes we get to talk to each other and sometimes we don't, but it's really great for you to come on with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks. Now, hold on, because we're going to ask you to come back at the end and talk about what you have coming up, because I want to hear about that too. Okay, thanks so much. And I'd like to tell you about our next reader, Dr. Charles E. Gannon. His best-known work is in the best-selling Caine Riordan hard science fiction series and the Vortex of Worlds epic fantasy saga. Winner of the Dragon, ALA Choice, and Compton Crook Awards, he's been a finalist for the Nebula for novels 4 times and Dragon 32 times. Multiple credits in other series include Ring of Fire with Flint, Black Tide Rising, Ringo, Starfire, White and Weber, publisher, Honorverse, Weber, and Known Space with Niven. Other credits: TV producer, distinguished professor, 5-time Fulbrighter, and Beltway Media SME. You can see his author Amazon link for more information at tinyurl, and we'll put this in the chat as well. 2P8K8972. That sounds very sci-techy. So thank you very much, and I am looking forward to hearing from Charles Gannon.
Hi, thanks for being here. And I'm going to read from 2 novels that are in sequence. They're science fiction novels. The parts that I'm reading are not the ones that are focused on the protagonists. These are the, if you want to call them the monstrous, I wouldn't call them monsters. I think monster is a title that other people give to things they fear outside them, as Joanne was saying. So the first one is in endangered species, and it's one of the first times we encounter the dominant species on a planet where the protagonists have crash landed, known as the Zakai. And the one, but it's being told from the standpoint of yet a different species called the Desicati. And that is where we start, in the throne room of one of these powerful Zakai. The newest guard in the hall, a tribal Kaj who had recently distinguished himself in battle, approached the throne. Lowering his eyes, he raised the tribute bowl until its rim almost touched Liege Huetsara's 7th, and so smallest, finger. The moment the Zagao touched it, the typical annoying buzz began. All the insects that were bound to Zakai in the fortress answered the blood call of their master, or the master of their master in most cases, and began gathering within the entrance. In a few moments, the air just inside and outside the broad opening was thick with their bodies and noise. Disinterested, or at least feigning it, Huetsara bade them approach. A thin stream of the largest insects emerged from the midair tornado of their smaller fellows, reaching toward him like a tentative tendril. One by one, they began landing on the rim of the bowl, dropping small chunks of flesh or insect carcasses into it. Each waited a moment, and when Huetsara did not react, they alighted briefly on his torso or legs, then flew madly off, a flake of his shedding skin hanging from their mandibles. A few paused before doing so, uncertain if their offering was acceptable, whether it did, in fact, weigh at least half what they did. When the bowl was full, Huetsara paused the rest of the swarm with a gesture. When they had quieted, he tipped its contents into his mouth. Just behind Fejmorbal's shoulder, he heard his new lieutenant Gustus Rug retching. "You have not seen that before." Gustus Rug shook his head, swallowing forcibly. To vomit would be a dangerous sign of weakness. "Good. You have passed." "Passed what?" Gustus Rug said, voice thick. "The test of seeing as a cow liege consume tribute." "And if I had failed?" "Huetsara might have banned you from returning or being part of any mission we undertake on his behalf. Or he might have had you devoured right here." Gustus Shrug started. "Surely you are not serious." Fejmorbal turned and stared at him. "You have bile on your lip. Lick it off and attend." He turned back to face the throne directly. The smaller insects were clustering around the bowl now, but always careful to land and drop their tribute separately. When one did so and attempted to fly off in the same instant, Huetsara raised a finger of his other hand. The insect, as large as Fejmorbal's wizened thumb, stopped abruptly, hovering. The hum of its wings was suddenly loud and irregular, as if it were struggling to fly out of a snare. Then, inch by inch, still buzzing wildly, it flew slowly back toward the liege, rising as it did. Huetsara's jaws parted in a smile as the insect came closer. He extended his long, serrated tongue. "What is happening?" Gustus Rug whispered. "The liege is compelling it by a blood bond, and demonstrating what happens to those whose tribute is less than half their own weight." The insect, wings working steadily even as its legs struggled wildly, alit on top of the cow's tongue. For a moment, All the other insects hovered, and the various onlooking humanoids and Zaka watched, silent. Then, with a sound like a muddy knife slipping into a leather sheath, Huetsara's tongue retracted abruptly. The insect emitted a shrill, desperate sound and was gone. The liege sent a glance around the room, then held forth the bowl again. The ritual of tribute resumed. Gustashrag managed to keep his shuddering exhalation almost entirely silent. Fejmorbal suppressed a sigh. Disappointing that one of his own race was so easily distressed by the behavior of a Zakao. One should expect monstrous deeds from monsters, after all. The smaller insects filled 3 bowls worth for Huetsar. Empty, he held it toward a final humming cluster of insects near the opening. As they advanced, Gustashrag murmured, "Why have they held back?" "Because they're not like the others, not mere Kixla," Fejmorbal explained. Gustashrag frowned. "Kixla, but I was told the word for insect is kick." "I hope you're worth the trouble of training you, neophyte." "It is kick. Kixla are those insects with which higher Zakai can forge a blood bond, and so be influenced. This last group of insects are more special still. They are Kikzo. Through that blood bond, Zakai can not only command their actions, but see and hear what they witness." That's the end of the selection from Endangered Species. I chose it because I wanted to also lead it into the second selection, which is slightly shorter, from the next book after that, which is Protected Species, and it shows you what can be done with Kikzo, the insects through which the Zakao can see and hear. Fejmorbal spied what he sought, 2 great flat slabs of basalt leaning almost flush against each other. "Stop. There. Send the Kikzo to the top of the gap between the rocks," he emphasized. The Zakig complied to his mental command, and there, just where Fejmorbal remembered it, was a slit-like opening, just wide enough for the Kikzo to slip through. "Send it in." The insect's vision was not optimal for darkness, but its ability to detect air currents and its own stunted sense of smell revealed the chamber as Fejmorbal remembered it, before it had been sealed by several of his mentor's most powerful Anagagoi. The ceiling rose as it moved further away from the slit, and the ground was piled high with sand. "Bones," the Zakig sent in surprise and typically morbid excitement. "Yes," Fejmorbal answered, inspecting the remains. Many half-buried Proch skeletons, almost as many polyglot Mangle remains, and at the far end of the room, a mummified forearm wearing a vantbrass. The familiar helmet poked up through the sand, where the buried body's head would be. "That is callus-skin armor," the Zakig sent as a subdued observation. "Yes," Fejmorbal replied. "It is the armor of my people. Now, bring in the Kixla." The other insect, even smaller, entered. Seen through the Kikzo's eyes, it was almost invisible in the dark. "Let it sing," Fejmorbal instructed. "You mean in this chamber? There are those in the sleep of the sands?" "I said, let the Kixla sing. Do not task me for answers again, Zakao." It was several long minutes, made longer by the Zakig's cognitive fidgeting, before several of the sand drifts began trembling. "Excellent." Fejmorbal envisioned the slightly larger Kikzo shared the image with the Zakig. "Bring it through the gap. It may not fit. If it loses some legs, I do not care. It will live to the end of the day. That is all I require." The larger Kikzo did, in fact, lose a leg. It was unlikely to prove fatal, but it was beneath a war leader to attain expertise in the physiology of bugs. He bid the Zakig send it to the furthest part of the chamber. Examine the rear wall, near the exposed arm. Again, little had changed. The fallen rocks were still piled high, but air was certainly moving through gaps between them. The sands began to heave as if they rested upon turbulent waves. At last, the Kixla's song was having the desired effect. "The sleepers," the Zakig said aloud. "Yes," Fejmorbal sent as several explosions of sand, gravel, and dirt jetted upward. From the rapidly refilling craters, figures dragged themselves erect, looking like emaciated specters in the dimness. They began moving listlessly. 4, no, 6 Zakai, the Zakig squealed aloud. Be silent. Feshmorbal inspected them as others began pushing up. They were almost cadaver, but he'd seen worse. Badly wounded or starving Zakai had been known to survive for centuries in the strange state they called the sleep of the sands. But typically, they were awakened by the passing of prey, which not only roused them but sent final reserves of strength coursing through their veins, one last chance to hunt, kill, and live again. But these, having been awakened by the song of the right kind of Kixla, were somnambulistic rather than frenzied. It would be some time before they began to prey on each other. Now what? The Zakig pushed, finally eager to witness what plans of mayhem were sure to unfold before the eyes of its Kixo. Feshmorbal smiled. Lead them to the far wall. The Kixla moved in that direction. The lumbering monsters followed slowly. Now, let it sing as loudly as it may. The almost inaudible drone that had awakened the Zakai suddenly ascended into a multi-tonal blend of crossing screeches and buzzing. The Zakai straightened, some of their heads snapping erect and turning as if seeking the source of an elusive scent. Without warning, one of the smaller ones launched itself at the amalgam of rock and dust at the back of the chamber, clawing vigorously. Others joined it. The rush of air from a chamber beyond touched the senses of all the insects. Now, Feshmorbal ordered, send the injured Kixu through the gap and prepare to follow my instructions closely. To do what? Feshmorbal could not help but gloat. To pick along a path I once knew. Do not tarry, damn you. Send it on its way. To find out where it's headed, what it's going to do, and what indeed mayhem ensues, you're just going to have to get the book.
Thank you so much, Chuck. And do you prefer Chuck or Charles?
Chuck.
Chuck. Okay, great. So thank you very much. So, and now this was, you were reading from Endangered Species and then Protected Species.
Correct.
Excellent. And those are the latest volumes in the Caine Riordan series?
They are indeed.
So tell us a bit about Caine Riordan. What is who is Caine Riordan and what is the series about?
No, that's one of those things that's short in the asking and long in the answering. 7 books at this point, and
yes.
I think something like 1.5 million words. So yeah.
Wow.
But the real short version of it is he's an individual who is in the wrong place at the right time, so that he is mistakenly picked up by security forces for something he was not doing, and was stuck in cold sleep. However, by the time knowledgeable people showed up and they realized they had the wrong guy, they said, well, we can't let him go back. He was a journalist and a defense analyst. So it's like, we can't own this. He's just going to have to get lost, which was happening on the moon every once in a while in those days. When he's brought back later on, humanity is only 13 years. There's been a lot of changes. Humans are out in the stars, and the first possible signs of ruins have been detected on Delta Pavonis, which is it is hard SF to the extent that, to a fairly high degree, that is an actual star that would be very likely to have the kind of planet that is postulated there. So this is what gets him started. First contact. That contact actually leads to a contact with live exosapients, which leads to a very failed meeting amongst the few intelligences that are known to exist. This leads to an invasion, but is it an invasion when 30% of Earth actually wants them to come? And that leads to an attempt to meet these various species in an attempt to I guess you could say, win friends, quell any potential disagreements, and in the final analysis, because of during the occupation of Indonesia, the mother of his son was very badly wounded and had to be taken by the most advanced species to give her any chance of survival. And years later, he has to go back and try to find out what's going on and why she hasn't been returned, and that entire group has sort of gone completely silent. And once there, they discovered that these supposed super beings, while they have a lot of capabilities, are also in a state of incredible disarray, and they've almost lost track. So he has to go on this sort of mix of, I guess you could say, I'm trying to think of the well, it's sort of like Adventures of Marco Polo, but it's set against the backdrop of the fall of the Roman Empire alien version, and that ultimately leads him out of known space into a very, very mysterious region that hasn't been entered for a long time, for reasons too long to go into. That's where they have the mishap with the ship. Actually, it's a betrayal, and most of them survive getting down to the surface. And these are some of the things that they're up against. Caine Riordan is, like I said, he's not a super soldier. He's not a super spy. If he has any claims to fame, he's a little bit of a polymath. Helps in his job. That's actually why he winds up on all these missions, because one of the things that I play with in the series is the idea of, to be a really good liaison to another culture, it's probably going to be the case that you are not necessarily entirely welcome in your own, for the simple reason that anybody who's that comfortable with somebody from outside, how do we feel about that? And this is one of the things, is that the different liaisons, that's one of the few things that the half dozen species have in common, is that all of those which are sort of tasked with interacting with each other experience the same sort of in-group, out-group othering. They pick up othering by contagion, if you will, with the different species. And so they are having to make their way on this world, where much of what seems to be transpiring would appear to be magic. It is not. And that's, I wanted to give it, however, from the monstrous side, rather than through human eyes. The Desicati, who are close to us in a lot of particulars, witnessing the truly alien and truly, the Zakao don't even reproduce. They reproduce by, like wasps. Certain wasps do depositing eggs in another species. So their lust for violence and their propagation impulse is the same thing. So you can just imagine how pleasant neighbors they are.
So there's a tremendous amount to this universe, to these stories, and it sounds like as much hard SF there is, you've got a lot of social ideas and themes at work too. Mm-hmm. And now, are the Zakai and the Desicati, is that did I get that right? Desicati?
The Desicati, yes.
Desicati. Yeah. Are they sort of crucial elements of the whole series?
That is the first scene where any of them show up.
Okay.
The first one that I read, that is the first time you get a look at them. But oh yes, they are quite crucial.
Okay.
They are connected to some other things we've seen before, but we just don't know it yet. Because one of the things that Joanne was saying before about everything is sort of a mystery, a secret. And I actually follow that myself, except for in this case, the question is really what was going on 20, 30,000 years ago in this part of the Orion spiral arm, because humans should not be in more than one planet. They should not be able to exist in other biospheres. It makes very little sense that there would be so many, that so many planets should be so hospitable. Mm-hmm. And then that leads into some issues about where are we from, what brought us here. And it is obviously, it's not prediction. I believe that science fiction that's prediction is a little bit of a fool's errand, because as my very much missed friend Ben Bovis said, if you want to make sure that a certain future doesn't happen, just write a science fiction story about it. But I do like to deal with reasonable projection. And what I did was I started from a world that is actually not too dissimilar from our own. But as they go forward and as they contact these species, and as they come into not only more advanced, but sometimes very, very different technology, and creatures which do not have DNA. I mean, there's nothing magic about DNA. At least it would be very strange if there was. We undergo rapid change, and the ones who are changing the fastest are on the if you will, the contact tip, and that is where Caine Riordan is, and that's why it's central to the story.
Excellent. Now we did have one sort of humorous question, but it leads into something I wanted to ask you about. This is from Teal James Glenn. Bugs.
Hey, Teal, how you doing?
But on the what I was wondering is, do you have any techniques or approaches you use to write or create these alien species and cultures? So they have to be really rich. The world building has to be really intricate to make it work. And I'm wondering how you approach that.
So I'm two things: form follows function, and to steal from the coming of intelligence story. I'll give you the example that probably most everybody knows if they're part of these genres, which is the initial scene. Forgive the sexism; it was Kubrick's, not mine. The Ascent of Man is the first part of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Most famous for the apes cavorting around, and they're on the verge of extinction, and one of them sees a bone and remembers something from the monolith where the sun is, it's a grand conjunction and all these other semi-mystical components for those who know what they're looking at in those scenes, and it seems to, or maybe just the smoothness of it, we're left to figure that out ourselves, of the monolith. He conceives of the bone as a potential tool. And next, there's a cut to him going off, and he comes back with some meat. He's killed something with it. And then the last thing that he does with this is it's the first kinslaying. There's this other rival, stronger tribe that's got dominance over the local water hole, and he changes things by killing the leader, and throws the bone up in the air. Now, what people don't know about this smash cut, because it is a smash cut, the bone is up and it's tumbling over and over. And in mid-tumble, it cuts to a scene in space with a long, what looks like sort of cylindrical satellite. Yeah. Except for that's not just a cylindrical satellite. That's an orbital ICBM satellite. So Stanley Kubrick gives us the last weapon to the first weapon in one cut, which I always thought that's pretty cool. But the point in terms of how I use it, we learned, therefore, how humans became intelligent. They had the notion to use tools to get ahead, to survive. There are other species which don't do that at all. As a matter of fact, one, you might say, learns to survive by learning how to bribe other species into living in places and doing things that it wants them to do. Their entire ethos, everything about them is different. And perhaps not surprisingly, they do not reproduce at all the same way we do. This sort of binarism of genetic mixture is prevalent. It's present in about half of the different xenospecies, but it's by no means the rule. I would getting a mix is probably always going to be good. If the expression of genetics is anything like a model for what we've observed, but doesn't mean it's the only way. So that's where I start, and then when I know how they survived, they're things tend to go towards their strength, so they're going to develop in that direction, and then I just I let it be the dominoes really start to fall pretty much the way they fall at that point.
Okay, so once you've kind of established all of that, you just follow sort of the logical progression for the species to where they are when the story takes place. Very cool. I did have another question for you. This is to talk just a little bit about some of the. Well, actually, before I ask you that, tell us a bit too about your epic fantasy saga, Vortex of Worlds. Just give us the quick logline, because I have a follow-up question about it.
Okay. So young fellow thinks he's going to be a great general, and is very promising for it. But then sequentially, from age about 12 on, he is sequentially made a librarian assistant, a courier, and then a sort of person who rides the borders and keeps an eye on people. And only when he's about 18 or 19 does he realize what's really happened. He actually got a harder job than being a general, and a far more selective one. He's essentially been turned into an intelligence asset. By being in the library, he reads many languages. He's seen many maps. He was very familiar with that. By being a courier, he was one of those few people who actually left his home and therefore has gone around the world, has actually used these languages, seen these cultures, and then has put those to use by watching borders. In the course of this, however, he also realizes that the world is broken, by which I mean there is this species called the bent, and they occasionally come out of these very barren, unpromising lands and scrublands and wreak havoc every 10 years or so. And then they're beaten back with terrible losses. And 10 years they come back again. There's only one problem. He knows enough about biology, and he knows, and he's never heard of Malthus, but he understands the concept. And his simple question is, they don't get to go home with much, and yet they reproduce a horde in 10 years, and they're not so very different in their life cycle than ours. How the heck is that happening? Cut to questions about how do dragons fly when those wings should not be able to keep that body off the ground for any time whatsoever? And how is it that there are fossils on a world that supposedly has only been around, according to the temples, for a few thousand years? Okay. So he discovers in the course of this, the danger is not going out and finding out about the bent or finding out about dragons. It's about when he brings that news home, he gets into big trouble and is essentially exiled. And the second book, Into the Vortex, that's the broken world, appropriately named. And then the second book, Into the Vortex, is because some of the older, wiser beings that are out there and that he's encountered in his travel kind of give him, in a slightly longer version of this very simple axiom, sometimes you have to leave home, like all the way, to see it clearly. So that's where the first two books are. And third, so it was while the second one was Into the Vortex, the third has the very reassuring title of Toward the Maw.
That's great. Yes, very reassuring indeed. I'm sure everything goes smoothly for the protagonist, and
always does.
Exactly. So do you have a genre or subgenre that you kind of consider home base? I mean, you're writing hard SF, epic fantasy. I'm sure you've written in other branches of SF and fantasy, maybe even outside those genres. But is there one that, when you just sit down and want to write something purely for yourself, that you come back to?
I come back to hard SF. I come back to hard SF simply because you want to talk about the mysteries. You know, whatever the answer to the question of how we got here, how long we've been here, is there anything else out there? If there ever has been, have we missed it? Are we one of the first? You know, there are questions that to me are very compelling. This doesn't mean that you also asked, are there socialist issues? Yes.
Yeah.
But actually, one of the things that I do, I kind of feel about most of our issues today, I zoom back, I look at it, let's say we go back 120 years. It's about the time differential to the hard science fiction that I write. Most of the issues then, while we still have the aftermath of many of what existed today and are still dealing with their sequelae, we are not in the same positions we were back then. Some of the things you couldn't even talk about. Some of the things were that the inequities that existed then weren't even perceived as inequities. And now we're certainly well down the path to confronting them. Whether we're that far down the path to eliminating them is a different issue. But the point being, I'm asking questions about, because I do have a presupposition, which is inequities, I think, always are going to exist. I think that's unfortunately coded into part of our evolutionary story. And I think it's going to take a bit of doing to find the right mix of variables that are in our existence, yeah, to sort of make a significant enduring change on that. But in the course of that, so my question becomes, what would the bases of bigotry be in the future in which I'm writing? And I if you're interested, we're just starting to get into those in the series. Most of the series has been outbound. Now the changes are starting to be felt. Those ripples are coming back home, and much is revealed.
Okay, and that's the Caine Riordan series you're talking about.
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, thank you. We're gonna have you come back again in a little bit to talk about what you have coming up next. And in the meantime, we're going to move on to Ellen Datlow. Thanks so much, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right. So our next guest tonight is Ellen Datlow. Ellen has been editing science fiction, fantasy, and horror short fiction for more than 4 decades. She currently acquires short stories and novellas for Tor.com and Nightfire. She has edited numerous anthologies for adults, young adults, and children, including the Best Horror of the Year annual series, When Things Get Dark, stories inspired by Shirley Jackson, Screams from the Dark, 19 Tales of Monsters and the Monstrous, and Christmas and Other Horrors. She's won multiple awards and was named recipient of the 2007 Carl Edward Wagner Award, given at the British Fantasy Convention for outstanding contribution to the genre, the Lifetime Achievement Award given by the Horror Writers Association, and the World Fantasy Life Achievement Award at the 2014 World Fantasy Convention. She runs the Fantastic Fiction at KGB Reading Series in New York City with Matthew Kressel, and she can be found on the website ellendatlow.com and on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook, where you can find her as she has noted here, by Googling her, or just look in the search. All right, welcome, Ellen.
Hello.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi there.
All right. Thank you so
Hello.
much for joining us. I know this is a little bit of a break in Galactic Terrors format since you won't be doing an actual reading, but we're really happy to have you here and looking forward to asking you some questions.
Uh-oh.
And the answer is always 12. Yeah. No.
Right.
Or 42. Yeah.
Mhm.
Could be.
Well,
Yeah.
To start things off, I just want to comment on the title of your latest anthology. I love that it's Christmas and Other Horrors. You know, implying, of course, that Christmas is a horror.
Yes.
And also the follow-on, a winter solstice anthology. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
It was the title came to me and it seemed perfect. Not from my experience. I mean, even though I was brought up Jewish, we've celebrated Christmas as far as gift giving, and I enjoyed it. And I don't have horrible dysfunctional family. I mean, I slightly, but not like some people have. So, but I know a lot of people who don't like to get together with their families on holidays, and it just seemed like the perfect. It felt right. But I was worried that my editor, my publisher would freak out. I mean, I just had no idea. I mean, I just came up with this and I said, wow, that's a great title, but they're going to hate it. And they're going to think it's bigoted and I'm going to get in trouble. And what else can I call it? And they just loved it. It's like, you do understand what I'm saying, right? And they were very happy with it. So it worked out perfectly.
Well, I mean, there seems to be this trend lately, last maybe 10 years or so, of looking at the darker side of Christmas and other holidays. I mean, Krampus has become, that's sort of the dark side of Christmas has become very popular. And there's a ton of Christmas horror movies that have come out in recent years that kind of inject horror stories into a Christmas setting. And there's renewed interest in Christmas ghost stories. I keep hearing people talking about that tradition.
Yeah, but the ghost stories, some of them were very scary and some were not. But I mean, that's the thing about ghost stories. They're so versatile that they can be horror and they can be cozy. You can have beautiful, cozy, very warm and moving ghost stories. But yes, it was a Christmas tradition that people told ghost stories around the fire. And I guess in the 19th century, 18th century, especially in England, in the UK, they all sat around their fires and told scary stories. And a lot of those stories were written by women at the time. I don't ask me to name them, the authors, because I'm not that expert, but I am aware that, there was a whole I wouldn't say cadre, but a whole group of women writers, either writing under pseudonyms or not, writing ghost stories. And then that kind of disappeared for 100 years. And
I was back. Yeah.
I mean, it's very weird. And it actually was Jessica Amanda Samuelson who started collecting those stories and bringing out publishing, I forget what press, but publishing collections of them and brought them back into people's lives and noticed them more. Although there were small presses, so I'm not sure how much of a audience they got, but she brought them back. into public consciousness. And so anyway, so I mean, the ghost story is certainly a Christmas tradition.
Well, it's an interesting thing too, because at holidays we tend to get together with family. Those of us who don't have totally dysfunctional families we hate, but you get together with families, and sometimes that makes you think about the ones who aren't there anymore. And I think maybe that turns our attention to ghosts, to the ones who are gone. So
that's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Sure,
could be a way to reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would be scary to some people and not to others. So that's intriguing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lindsay's story that you mentioned, The Sound of Reindeer.
Yes.
If I had gotten, that would have been perfect for the anthology, but she didn't even know about the anthology. She sent it to me at tour. I forget someone. She's been sending me work, and I don't remember where she came from. Someone recommended that she start sending me stories, and this one was like perfect for Christmas. I still too bad I didn't get it in time for my anthology, but it's great for tour. And it wasn't actually supposed to come out this year, but Nancy Lambert, bless her, who's not here, but she should be here. Why isn't she on here?
She may be watching, but we don't see everybody unless they make comments.
Okay, well, she's production liaison on for short fiction at tour.com now.
Yeah.
And she said, hey, we have let's do it in December. Tour doesn't, for the last few years, they weren't publishing new stories in December. I think they were giving everyone a break. But Nancy said, hey, let's do it in December. It's like, perfect. If you're willing to do it, sure. I can quickly edit it. We can line it and get it in production and everything. And it's perfect. It's an excellent, really creepy Christmas story.
Oh, I'm glad she shared it with me. And I read it the other day and I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. Be careful what you ask for when you go somewhere for Christmas.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what grabs you when someone sends you a story, Ellen? What makes you have interest in something? I'm sure there's a variety of things.
Well,
but
it's the first thing. It has to be well written to a certain extent. If it isn't well written, I don't even want to continue. I can't read. I have a real hard time reading badly written stories. That's like, it has to be a certain level of not literary, but tone. I like the use of words. I mean, I like the good use of words by writers. So I mean, that's the first thing. If it's not well written, I'll immediately, say no. But then it's hard to define. It's something that just jumps out at you. I read a lot of, I don't get many, I don't get slush anymore. So I don't see a lot of unpublished work that is sent to me. But I used to read slush. And the thing is, reading anything like that, it was like, you go through it, and then something jumps out at you. One story is like, oh, wow, there's something about it, either voice or tone or what it's about or the characters. Characters make a big impression. I want to read about believable characters. And so it's the whole confluence of what makes a good story for me, or what's a story that knocks me off my feet, and so and of course I read a lot. The best of the year, I'm always reading short fiction that's been published. But it also, I say, sometimes stories just sit there like dead fish. There's nothing, or a dying fish. A lot of times, but a lot of stories, there's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing wonderful about them that makes them different or brings the reader in. It's something special, and to define it, I can just describe it. I can just point to the stories that I publish. Basically, there's something about that story that got to me, and it usually is. If it's beautifully written but about nothing, I'm probably not going to want it either.
Okay.
But if it's really, and it doesn't have to be beautifully written for me to want to buy it, but as I said, it has to be competently written. And then if you have a really great plot, I actually like well-plotted stories. I'm partial to plotting. I read a lot. When I'm reading for the year's best, I read, some very interesting semi-literary magazines, and nothing happens. Seriously. And even some stories that are supposed to be horror stories, nothing happens. They just don't go anywhere. And to me, that's just boring. I want something. I actually prefer a good plot.
Mhm.
I mean,
I-
sometimes the story can have atmosphere. I mean, occasionally there's something that's got atmosphere, but usually you can't sustain it and make it wonderful more than like 3,000 words. You know, if
Mhm.
it's only atmosphere, unless that atmosphere builds up to something great, it's very hard to do that.
I just want to interject that I've been in the same book group with the same women for 25 years. And just about every month we read another book. They pick the books from New York Times and
Mhm.
Book Review, et cetera, mostly literary fiction. So that means over the last 25 years, if you do the math with some other stuff we've read, I read about 200 literary fiction novels.
And how do you feel about
Not
that?
much has happened there. However, it has really taught me how to pay attention to characters and show somebody that we may or may not, care about. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
But we actually have a follow-up question, if we could, that Teal asked.
I'm seeing.
Yeah, what makes you want to work with some writers as opposed to just taking something like from Best Of that's already published, or to put time into developing it?
It has to have something. It has to have something initially that gets me, that I like about it. It has to be almost there, and I think that I can work with the author to make it better.
Okay.
There are very few stories that I will put so much attention in, because I don't have that much energy or time. So it has to have something to begin with. However, have been a few stories that I've worked with, with the writer for multiple edits, multiple rewrites. And in the old days, when I was younger and newer and Omni, there were several. It happened more often that the story it didn't work. Even I couldn't get it to work. I didn't think the author got it to work even after several rewrites.
Wow.
But now when I take the time, I'm usually pretty sure it's not always it's not always seasoned writers. But if I have a seasoned writer who I've worked with before, I will work, and I like the story. Like, okay, I'll give an example of Kelly Robeson. I bought her novella, The Waters of Versailles, which was terrific. I bought that for Tor.com when we were doing the novellas online. I see I'm getting off the screen. So I had worked with her before, and then she sent me the story, The Human Stain, or A Human Stain. And it was really, really creepy, but it also was kind of all over the place. It was very confusing. It's a Gothic. I ended up publishing it online at Tor.com, and it won the Nebula. But it went through multiple revisions, and it was in, at least the second or third revision. Suddenly I asked her, when I don't know what something's going on, I'll say, what's going on here? How do you see what's going on? And she told me. I said, boy, oh boy, that's not what I got at all. It's like, really? And it turns out, whatever, that's, if I'm that invested in the story because I really like what's going on, even though it's really, really creepy, I will work with the author to try to get them to bring it out. It's not on the page. You got to put enough on the page so that we can grasp it and know what the heck's going on. And even after the revisions, there are still things that are very, not vague, it's very weird. There are elements in the story. It takes place in this house, and this governess comes and takes care of this boy, and it's icky, and it's got things with teeth. I mean, I can't believe it was nominated and won for the Nebula, because the Nebula is supposed to be a science fiction and fantasy award. This is out and out horror. But there were things in the furniture, images of things carved in the furniture, that I missed completely. I was like, oh, okay. But I mean, it probably takes multiple readings to get the entire understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
But that was worth it. And, and I don't do that very often. And if it's a new writer, it's harder, because you're not sure if it is going to work out, and you're going to spend all this time working with them over and over, and then you're both disappointed. And I have to say, it's like, I'm sorry, it's still not working for me. I don't know why. And then, but try it on someone else. So I work with writers, but I try not to. I mean, there's something there in the particular story. It's not the particular writer necessarily. I mean, I bought a story by Stephen Graham Jones years ago. Stephen Graham Jones is my go-to. Well, he used to be. I don't know if he can still do it, but he used to be my go-to writer. I need a story in a week, and in 2 days I'd have the story. And he wrote a story, one original story, I think it was in the cutting room. It was my reprint anthology of film horror, and I asked him I don't know why I asked him for an original, and he sent me something called Tenderize. I think it was called Tenderizer. And actually, I thought something much more icky was going on than was. When I said, "Hey, was that happening?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, it's not." I mean, I didn't tell him to put it in. I said, "There should be incest in there. Why isn't there incest?" He said, "No, that's not." No,
He said, "No, that's creepy, Ellen." Yeah.
no, that was kind of disappointing. It's like, well, why didn't it would have been a lot creepier if it was. But anyway, yeah.
So, I mean, Ellen, it sounds like one of the elements that you're talking about is, and this is in a lot of contemporary horror, is ambiguity, where there's the story, there's the plot, but you may not be sure, at least on the first reading, what really happened.
Sometimes that's too much. It's more layers. For me, when I really love a horror story, it's got more than one layer.
Right.
Generally. I mean, there's more stuff going on under the it's like the melody and the bass and the other, everything under there for all the stories I've loved. I mean, science fiction and fantasy stories as well. The ones that, there are lovely stories that are very superficial, that are really wonderful, but they don't, and they may stay with you. I mean, they're made out of meat. It's like, 500 words by Terry Bisson. It became a classic. It's all over. I mean, I published that. And it is what it is. It's not much to it except what it is.
Yeah.
But really, and it became a classic on its own, for whatever reason. People really loved it. I love it. Well, I don't know if they remember it now, but certainly over a period of time, people were reading it all over the place. But for me, the stories that linger and that I'm happy to read over and over are the ones that have more layers. Yes, you have your superficial, this is that is the plot that I like, that I want. But then and I keep going off the screen. Sorry, I have to stay still, don't I? And then, but then the layers of emotion and relationships and what else is going on in the protagonist's life and under there. And that's what makes it stronger, and I think makes the story last and linger in your mind longer.
Okay.
People say, which are your favorite stories? I said the ones that I reprint over and over. Obviously, I love those stories.
Right.
What do they have in common? I have no idea. I don't analyze that kind of part.
So,
but there are stories that I've loved, and I will reread, and I will be happily reread them and reprint them when I have the opportunity.
So changing gears just a bit.
Yes.
How do you come up with new themes for new anthologies? So your anthologies are typically themed around something aside from the year's best, which is kind of its own.
Well, first of all, the reason, people are saying, why do you always do theme anthologies? It's because non-theme anthologies don't sell.
Right.
At least that is the word around publishing. And it's very hard to get publishers to commit to an unthemed anthology. But what I try to do is usually they just pop in my mind, or sometimes they last for a long time and I can't sell them. I mean, I've been wanting to do like a Hellbound Train anthology for years, but at first of all, the problem is that the idea was brought up by someone who I no longer in touch with, and I don't feel I could do it on my own, and I don't want to work with that person anymore. So that was an idea that I have did anthology proposals. The one that was the doll collection, that I had the idea for years, but I didn't know what to call it. And when Marilee Heifetz is my agent, and she said, you have to come up with a really good title. And I couldn't think of anything. I just couldn't come up with the title for it. And then a friend who's a writer who I've published, Veronica Shana, said, how about something about the doll collection? I said, that's perfect. And once I got the title, I was able to sell the book. But I had the idea for a long time. And sometimes, once in a while, a publisher will approach me. The Poe anthology, I was approached by, I guess, Solaris, because it was posed by Centennial or something. I don't even remember. And they said, hey, you want to do a Poe anthology? Yes. And Lovecraft Unbound actually was suggested by, I got the title. I mean, the title came to me. It was like a takeoff on Brian Aldiss's Frankenstein Unbound. Yeah. Rob Simpson, who at the time was with Dark Horse. Dark Horse was doing books. They did a few of my anthologies. And they wanted a Lovecraftian anthology. So I had a few reprints, but mostly originals on stories that were inspired by Lovecraft, no tentacles. I mean, those are my guidelines, no tentacles. So sometimes, it depends. I'm lucky that I come up with ideas, and the thing is they have to be broad enough that I can get people to write interesting stories in a variety. You know, I don't like to do, I would never do a really narrow themed anthology. I want the authors to spread out or stretch out as much as they can against the theme.
Yeah.
But
and
you know,
then how? I'm curious. Once you have all those stories, how do you decide what order to put them in? Because I think that is one of the arts of the editor.
you pick
Jim and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
I'm glad I have something to drink.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Well, this is how I do it. You know, other people do it different ways. To me, the first story and the last story are the most important. The first story is the one you want to draw readers in. And I actually need a cough drop, and I don't know if I can get one.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll just cough away occasionally.
I'm sorry.
The first one, you want it to be inviting. It shouldn't be too long. Should not be too complicated, not be weird. You want it to, as I said, to bring the right reader in, but also to kind of give an idea of what the anthology is about in a very broad way. The last story, or the next to last story, and it has to be a strong story. Then last or the next to last story should be what you feel is the strongest in the book. And the longest.
Oh, because you don't want that long one in the middle
Well,
necessarily.
it can be long, but John Lang's are always really long. You don't want to put a novella in the middle.
Yeah.
That would be really bad.
They'll get lost. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just separates the whole middle too much. No, if it's a novella, I would always put it last. But once in a while, I'll put a novella next to last if there's a story that feels like a grace note afterwards. That's pretty short. And then there are other things. It really astounds me when reviewers say, "Oh, the order is so fabulous." It's like, well, that's great, but it was just luck. I mean, kind of. And then I have to figure out how to juggle them.
Right.
What you do is, you have the first strong story, not too long, and then you want to vary the point of view. You want to vary the tone. You want to vary where it takes place. Either that, or put them next. When you have two stories in the same event, kind of in the Arctic or something, or in the cold, you either want to put them together or you want to separate them as much as you can. Just so but sometimes you can figure, well, I'll put these two together. And that's an interesting contrast because they're the same place, but they're very different stories. Then sometimes there are always stories that you don't feel as strongly about by the time you finish the book. So you sometimes put them 3/4 of the way through, and then you put a strong, you're kind of burying them, but you're not. But
We're all thinking about where our stories have been in different anthologies.
It doesn't have to always be like that, but you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And
you you still need it to be in there somewhere. Yeah.
And what I have to do is start looking. The bigger a book is, it's harder to organize. If I have more than 20 stories, it's really, really hard to figure out and remember, because I have to go back to the stories and remember how they began and kind of get a feel for what they're about again, to figure out, is this going to go with that? This one's too similar in that way to that. I can't put them next to each other. So at that point, it's a judgment call. And of course, this is assuming people read stories in order. Because it's not
no guarantees. Yeah.
Yes.
The stories in order.
Right? I always assume that people pick up an anthology and read the shortest story first, whichever.
If I don't have enough time to do that, sometimes I'll do that. Oh, I only have a few minutes. I'll read the short. I'm read the really short one. Yeah. So yes.
Well, that's the advantage of an anthology. I just want to point out, though, in Christmas and Other Horrors, I felt so called out by the very first story by Christopher Golden, which says the importance of a tidy home. And I'm like, oh, crap, I'm done for. Yeah.
It's a nice, creepy story.
It is a nice, creepy story.
Story.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're at about the point where we can bring on bring Chuck and Joanne back, and we'll talk a little bit about what everyone has coming up next. But Ellen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Talking about everything you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just close out with Teal's comment, which I agree with. If someone
time for luck,
genius.
Yeah, agree.
Great. All right. So welcome back, Chuck and Joanne.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm guessing a lot of the things that Ellen was saying about stories and all that apply for all the different genres that we write. So, have to have something cool, something good going on there. Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So, hey, we're coming up on 2024, everybody. What's coming up for you guys? Now, I know, Chuck, you just had a book release, which was number 7, right? So tell us.
Yeah, depending on how you count Jess. 6 endangered species was released in August, and protected species was released about 10 days
a week ago? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that's sort of, it sounds like I'm a whirlwind of productivity. Actually, what I was a whirlwind of no sleep and rarely seeing the sun, because those two should have been stretched out, but COVID hit again. It was long COVID. And the bottom line is, and this is one of the things that folks who exist more in the sort of the direct to Kindle world don't necessarily get, that the freight train is moving a year before, long before, but the physical component of the freight train is moving 1 year before it pulls into the bookstore station. And so a lot of work had to be crammed in to be able to make 2 trains that should have originally been easy to hit. It was staged out so that they'd be close, so that you'd get one and you'd get the other right on top of it. And instead it worked that I didn't sleep much.
I remember talking to you like over the last year, and you're like, yeah, that's really cool. I can't talk now. So I understand. You were very busy, sir. Yeah, cool. So congrats on those.
Thank you.
Yeah,
now,
and Joanne.
Not to put the pressure on, but do you have anything for us to forward to in 2024? Will there be an 8th book?
Oh, you're talking to me again.
Put him on the spot while we got him.
The 3rd edition of the first book is coming out in February, and that has about 20,000 words of additional material that was put in, a lot of which is actually back stuff and some illustrations. And in April, there's something in a related series set in the same universe called Admiral and Commander. That was a collaboration with Chris Kennedy, and like I said, that's April. And then I think for a while, nothing.
Wow.
Okay.
Ooh.
Well, you've earned a break for sure.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So, Joanne, this one just released in November for you, right? November 1st. So I guess you've been a little busy, right? With the
and I can relate to what Chuck was saying, because it was a sort of a short turnaround. I mean, we put it out in about 6.5 months from contract to release.
Awesome.
So I don't know about 2024. I'm right now about the 3rd revision of a cozy-ish mystery, shall we say? I don't do happy endings well, and and I don't do nice, clean books very well. Although the mystery is fairly clean. I think there may be 2 sex scenes in the mystery. So I'm trying to wrestle my urges into the cozy category, just because. And so if that happens, it's
let us know.
Mystery in which the sleuth is a poet.
A poet. Ooh.
So hopefully this will actually become something everybody reads someday, except for me and my very close friends. I'm looking forward to that in 2024.
Excellent. Oh, that sounds like fun. Cool. Ellen, I have to ask you one more question. How many things do you read for your best of horror anthologies? I've always wanted to know the answer to this.
I can actually tell. I counted up the anthologies.
Yes.
More than about 120 this year. Anthologies is what I got. I have readers. I have a couple of readers. One who reads electronic stuff that probably is not going to be horror, and one who reads anthologies that probably not going to be horror, or I'll spot check some and then give them to her. Here, you tell me something
for a second opinion. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is the timing for?
Sorry.
Oh no, what is the timing for the best of? When
well, unfortunately,
I know it's funny this year. You said
late this year. It should have come out this year. It's not coming out to January 16th.
Okay.
I told my editor is way too lenient. He never says, "Would you get it in already? You're running late." And I said, "Next, you have to tell me I'm running late because I do not want the book to come out the year after. This is the first time, and I hope the only time it ever happens." Okay. So, I mean, I'm reading now. I mean, I've got piles of stuff in my apartment, and I start making the decisions over the next few months, but a couple of months, and I try to get the summary in. I get stories in by February or so, and the whole summary by March or April. It's a fast turnaround, but as I said, I screwed it up, and my editor didn't tell me. It was late, so it was delayed. So
Okay.
I have an anthology coming out, all reprint from Tachyon in the fall. I'm not sure exactly what date yet. Called Fears, and I think it's Tales of Psychological Horror. I think that's the subtitle, but that's what it is: psychological horror. Very little or no supernatural in the stories, and that's all reprints coming out. And that hopefully will be illustrated. When I've done anthologies for Tachyon, they want Jacob always wants something really broad, and so it's really hard to find really broad themes. But sometimes he wants another one. It's like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do next. But Fears is broad enough, and he has John Coulthard. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I mean, he did Body Shocks, which is gorgeous. I mean, he designs it. He designs these beautiful illustrations, and the table of contents it's just gorgeous. I mean, what he does with the books. So I don't know what he's going to do with Fears. It should be interesting. Yeah, so that'll be coming out either late summer or early fall next year, I think.
Very
Cool.
cool.
I don't have an original anthology coming out next year. Hopefully, I'll be selling one soon.
I just want to say you're bringing out that best of horror thing in January because it's just in time for my birthday. So that's why. So thank you.
Oh, it's a birthday present to you.
Yes, that's it.
Right.
Clearly, that's it. Yeah.
All right. So, we were talking a little bit about the tradition of Christmas ghost stories and things like that. I'm just wondering, before we wrap up, does anyone have a favorite holiday tradition this time of year, ghostly or not, that you always look forward to?
Well, I used to have a friend who had a Christmas dinner every year for years in Soho, New York, and we always had goose, and it was great. And over time, she didn't want to do it. People dropped out. It was like, and she would actually do most of the food and the cooking, and she was a really good cook. And that was really wonderful for years. And before that, I had other friends in Brooklyn who had Christmas dinners, and we had wonderful turkey. And one year we got sick of turkey, so we had lobsters running around the kitchen. But since my friend Claire stopped doing the Christmas dinners, I'm probably going to go to a movie and have Chinese food or something. If I get home in time. I'm still in Florida.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
I belong to I have a group of friends, and we had for many years done Christmas cookie exchanges and things like that. Last year we just decided to do a meeting before Christmas, and this year we're having to do it January 14th for various reasons. But part of the reason is that these parties always included a news quiz because we were all journalists. And now many of us have retired or left the business for whatever reason. And the one woman who is always the organizer has been covering the anti-Semitism Palestinian controversy at the University of Pennsylvania. And she's so buried under news, we might not even have it on January 14th at this point.
Okay. Okay. I have a theory that birthdays last at least a week, so maybe your New Year's stuff could be like, the new quarter. Yeah.
February.
Yeah.
We used to have a New Year's Eve party that was gave us a chance to see a whole bunch of people that we hadn't over the course of the year. COVID kind of, you can imagine, that wasn't exactly the most positive environment for a New Year's Eve gathering where there are all sorts of half-consumed drinks left around and things like that.
Yeah.
Not like it's a spreader event or anything.
No.
So, and it's really had a kind of a rocky start getting it again, also because I have 4 living kids and they are at all different stages, and just getting them all back in the same place at the same time is that genre, I guess one might call it sort of almost post-apocalyptic in the degree of entropy that's involved in that. So just getting together, that's our project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve is my birthday, so I hate I hate New Year's Eve
my.
parties.
Uh,
The New
Okay.
Year's Eve parties celebrate the end of my birthday, so screw them. I just want to have a nice, quiet date dinner with friends if I can do it.
I think you share
That's
that
fair.
with Stephen Van Patten, Ellen.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
He's some
Yes,
also.
that's right. That's
I
right.
do toast everyone on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay.
Mhm.
In the morning. I mean, the morning. My birthday's in the morning of the 31st, so at
Yes.
12:40 or 1 o'clock, as long as I can stay.
Yeah.
Say we're doing a toast. Let's toast to my birthday.
I remember this. Yeah.
We'll be doing it this year, I hope.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I have one tradition. I always wear purple on New Year's Eve. And the reason is when I was at Bryn Mawr College in Philadelphia, I had a bunch of friends and we were saying, we're going to miss each other. We're going to miss each other. And they said, everybody wear purple and then we'll think of each other. So I have been doing this for years since then. I wear purple on New Year's every year.
How nice.
What about you? And what about you, Jim?
Well, I'm actually one of the reasons I was asking is because there's a tradition that I've been seeing a lot more people talk about this year. There's a bookstore near me that's participating in this, and an author is writing about it in his newsletter. And it's this Icelandic tradition. I'm going to completely mangle the pronunciation, but it's like the Jólabóka flood, the Christmas book flood.
Oh, yes.
What is it? I never heard
It's
of
a
it.
tradition of gift giving of books, specifically books, and then sitting around and reading them that night. I think Christmas Eve, and it just seems like such a a wonderful thing to me. I don't think I could ever get any traction with that here at home. There's too many distractions and other activities to do around the holidays, but I just love the spirit of that. I think for writers and publishers and editors, it's a wonderful idea.
Well, when your dogs start reading, Jim, you can do that. That'll
That's
work.
right. Yeah, I make them sit and I read to them. It's,
There you go.
get a lot of those head tilts, the confused head tilts from the dogs.
But how do you know the dogs don't read?
Right.
That's
true.
Well, they don't leave any new bookmarks, so
Well, Jack the jerk will leave teeth marks on the book.
is that a good sign? I let's say, yeah, that's a
I
cat.
don't know,
Yeah,
Yeah, Jack. You know Jack the jerk.
I do. Yes.
Yes, my black monster cat.
Mhm. Wow. Oh, that's fun.
He's a very bad boy.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for Galactic Terrors and for sharing your work with us and answering questions and just generally, being such great guests. We really appreciate it. It's a wonderful way to close out 2023.
Mhm.
And I think Carol and I would like to wish you all the best in 2024. Happy holidays.
Thank
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And
It's
please-
fun to do.
Likewise.
Let
Same
us-
to our audience.
Yes, indeed. And I was
Thank
going to say,
you,
let us know
Lydia.
when some of these new things come out. Yeah. So and folks are saying thank you and looking forward to next time.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone. Yeah.
And,
Thanks, everybody.
We'll be back
So-
on January 11th with our lineup to be announced. As the year drags on, Carol and I tend to slow down a bit.
Yeah, sometimes Administrivia gets the best of us. Yeah. But we knew you guys were coming for a long time and we've been looking forward to this for forever and with good reason. So this is a great chat. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Happy
So
New Year.
also, and to our guests, feel free to hang out in the studio for a minute after we're done, and we'll just say goodnight and thank you one more time. And everybody else, have a happy New Year and a great 2024.
All right. We look forward to seeing you next year.
Mhm.